Good morning, friends. This is the Checkin In podcast. I am your host, Biniam. Welcome back. It's been a few days. It's been a few days since we've last been together, but I am thrilled to be back. Some circumstances and dynamics that play to a delayed start this week on the Checkin In podcast. So, whereas I'm usually here on Monday, today is Wednesday, December the 1st, and I just got back from a few days with friends out in the countryside, and it was fantastic. But it's also good to be back. I did try to take some of my gear with me so I can keep on doing a little podcast while out on holiday. And it just turns out that I didn't take, well, I forgot my microphone for one and I forgot a few other things. So it didn't quite work out. And even this morning, just trying to get everything troubleshooted audio wise was a bit of a challenge. But I am thrilled to be back with you, thrilled to be back behind this microphone, talking about the things we talk about and spending time focusing on what does it look like for us to get to the next level in our existence as human beings. Thank you for joining in. This podcast is actually recording a little earlier than usual. So usually I'm like recording about 3-4 hours from now. However, because I'm starting a new job today, I have to facilitate making it on time for work. And so we are recording in the wee hours of the morning, waking up early. So for those of you who are able to join in on the live stream, fantastic. I am thrilled to have you join in. For those of you who are going to settle for the recording, I also want to say thank you for spending the time that you do in tuning in and being a part. And I guess we'll see about playing around with time frames. This is the podcast where we have three pillars. The three pillars that sustain and guide our focus as we ask self-reflection questions. The three pillars are as follows: awareness, kindness, and happiness. Awareness in getting to know ourselves, kindness in how well we treat ourselves, and happiness, of course, in reference to working towards it, processing through all other helpful, necessary ones. YYC, good morning. How are you? Nice to have you joining in this morning. So today, guys, here is the question we're asking. It's a very simple question, but it's a really important and profound question. The question we're asking today, and how's Uber going? Uber is actually on hold right now. As much as I love Uber, hello, Mr. Goop, I see you. I'm just putting Uber on hold while I work at some new job context. So I am looking forward to driving again with Uber. It's just the timing right now isn't quite ideal as I focus on some other things, getting things in order after some attempts to put together a business on my own, and that didn't quite go as well as I planned. So here I am, sort of regrouping. So that's where that's at. But definitely Uber has a forecast in the future, which I look forward to getting back to it. Timing right now, however, isn't ideal. So that's what we're gonna do. Thank you, YYC. I so appreciate you. So the question we're asking today, a very simple one, and yet super important. One of the ones that took me a lifetime, literally, to learn how to attend to. And the question is: do you have trouble saying no? Do you have trouble saying no? Eeps. And hey, Ollie, how are you? Good to have you joining in. Some of you might be thinking in terms of, well, what's wrong with saying no? Nothing, unless YYC says 100% has trouble saying no. I was there with you once upon a time, and I still am there with you on occasion. But this is why we do the Checkin podcast, is we like to ask these kind of questions, go through these kind of reflections to figure out how do we get aware of who we are, why we are the way we are, how we can move forward in a trajectory that better suits or matches what we want to experience. And in the midst of it, to learn to be kind to ourselves in that process, because it's not an easy thing. So having trouble saying no is one of those things that has a variety of reasons for why we do it. For some, it is because we don't want to disappoint others. We don't want to make them feel like they are, we don't want to make them feel bad when we are saying no. David, how are you? Good to see you coming in. I see you. For others of us, it is for a variety of other reasons where we feel compelled because we want, yeah, there's the pleasing aspect. We want to not disappoint others around us. There is the sense of wanting to seem competent. Perhaps we want to give a certain presentation that we can always do it, and so in so doing, we want to sort of like uh, we want to give that perception that we are maybe hard workers or that we aren't negative people. There are other reasons I'm trying to consider here of why potentially we might have trouble saying no. I would say another one of those reasons is just because of the way we grew up. The way we grew up, we were always taught to be able to get the job done, whatever it takes, right? And so we are on the job front fearful of economic challenges that may come from saying no and determining what we are willing to sign up for or not. Sometimes we just don't even realize that we are always saying yes. We're in that zone of yes, 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 and then sort of stressing out because of those commitments that we've made along the way. And so we feel compelled to move on that way. Um, in other contexts, I'm also imagining where we just have never learned how to be able to determine where our boundaries lie. Our boundaries in terms of here's what I have the space or capacity or energy for, and where I don't. And when we don't have that awareness of our bodies and how we tick and how we move and how we operate in those dynamics, we tend to stretch ourselves beyond our means, stress out, and then move into these zones where we look back and say, how did I get here? Because it's really not reflective of where we wanted to arrive, right? And so that's a tough thing. For you guys, what are some of those things that make it difficult for you to say no? What kind of struggles or pressure points do you experience that make this two-letter word extremely difficult to say? I wish I could say this, but I can't. What are those? In my context, for a huge part of my life, it was driven primarily because of my people-pleasing tendencies. I had Alex says, is silent treatment sometimes okay? I ignore responding to some people's email because it consumes my time. That's a great question, Alex. I would say in that scenario where you aren't quite ready to answer, that's an appropriate response as your group. Sometimes I also give that option to those that I'm talking to. In the midst of chatting with my friends, I ask a lot of questions that are really deep, Alex. And as I ask those questions, sometimes those who are who are hearing my question, I mean, they enjoy the question, but they don't know what their answer is because they haven't had time to think about it. One of the things I tell them, Alex, I tell them that it's okay if they don't have an answer yet. They can take their time to think through what their answer might be. I give them that space to say, hey, get back to me when you're ready. In the same vein, I would say it's not the silent treatment to ignore responding to your emails because it consumes your time, because you're in essence saying, this is not the right time. I'm going to answer it at some point, but not at this moment. So if you're challenged on that, I would, if I were in your shoes, say something like, not ignoring you, I just need some time to respond, or it's not the right time for me to respond right now, but I'll get back to you, right? You're buying yourself some time. If it is the kind of email where they can see that you did receive the email, I probably wouldn't even open the email until I'm ready to, and I have time to check out the email. That way they know, okay, it hasn't been opened, so he's not responsible. If you do open it and they were able to see that you open it, I'll just write off a quick, I'll respond when I get a chance or something like that. That leaves them with communication that you're not ignoring them, but you also need some time, right? And it's the same thing with phone calls for me, Alex. If a phone call is coming in, I'm able to glance at who it is. I'm like, hey, I can't talk to this person right now because they're not a priority for me right now because I've got other things to attend to. I won't have any qualms about saying, yeah, I'll have to put them on hold or find some other time later to get back to them. Does that make sense, Alex? I would say don't feel bad about that. Hey, Carmen, how are you? I see my friend. I'm recognizing your new voice. Much love, brother. God bless. I appreciate you all there. Thank you. So yes, that's how I process that question there. Headed to Vancouver right now. That's crazy, Carmen. Oh man, so you'll be flying over when you fly over. Wave. Are you still doing Ubers? Rook. I am taking a break from Uber at the moment, but yeah, I'll definitely be going back at some point in the future. Thanks. That is awesome advice, Alex. I'm glad that helps. Okay, man, great. I will wave at some point when I'm on my way to my first day out of work as a truck driver today. I'll be in Calgary for labor on the 12th. Okay, give me a heads up when that's coming because I would definitely make pains to come and finally meet you in person, Carmen. It's been such a long time, and you've been one of the long time um, viewers of my channel. So appreciate you, brother. When did you start the podcast? Oh, we started this back in July-ish of this year. So 106 episodes today. Amazing. Truck driver, wow, congrats. Yes, Carmen, thank you. So yes, there are a variety of reasons we were getting to for why saying no is extremely difficult. Backbrook, thank you for the roses. I super appreciate that. But the real question is it a bad thing to say no? Is it a bad thing? And I know Alex's question was kind of intimating that to you. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for us to say this two-letter word which sounds so simple because there are the money season now. Right on, Carmen. It's difficult for us to say no because we are sort of locked into some social expectations where this two-letter word, it seems unfriendly. When we say no, people feel rejected or they feel like they're put down or they feel they like we're disappointing them, and we don't like that feeling. We've been brought up to feel like be kind and try to accommodate as best as you can, even if it's at your expense. I would like to propose this morning that saying no is a really critical aspect of self care in our lives. When we don't know how to say no, we're really continuing to devalue or bring lack of worth in our own existence. Why is that? Because at the very heart of it, dear friends, we are finite. At the very heart of it, we have our limitations. At the very heart of it, we can only go so far before we say in a day, I am tapping out, I'm tired. Last night I came back in the evening. It was fairly early in the evening when I got back. And when I got back, I wanted to stay up with my sister, who I live with. I wanted to hang out. But I knew I had to wake up early this morning. And I thought, I can still handle it, but I actually need to say no because I need to get to bed so I can have enough rest for today and get the job done that I need to get done. So the very fact that we are human and finite in our existence is one of those critical components that makes it necessary, a necessity for us to be able to learn how to say no, because we can only go so far before our tank runs out. What does that look like now for us to be aware of how much we can give and how much we can't? Alex says they feel like disrespected, and that is not my intention. I know, even though that's not our intention, there are ways for us to still be able to communicate this word while still attending to that element where we feel like, oh man, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to make them feel bad. I don't want to make them feel like I don't care. There are some ways, and I'm going to get to those, Alex. So just hang on here because I know what your meaning is when you're like, I don't want to disappoint or discourage anyone, right? Cade, I'm awesome. How are you today? Good to have you joining the podcast. Thanks for coming in. So, like I said, this two-letter word, no, is a really important part of our skill set in caring for ourselves. Remember the three pillars of this podcast, the trifold are: one, the awareness piece. Why is it that we feel uncomfortable saying no? Really helpful to know that. And especially as we dig deep and find out why this is such a difficult thing for us to attend to when we're saying no to someone, the follow through is how can we have access to that no so that we can first of all know how to care for ourselves. For example, if you've got some people in your life who are making some significantly high demands. They're like, hey, I want you to always be available when I call you. I want you to always come over when I need you. I want you to always be on point when I'm going to ask for your input or assistance in my life. Most of us would want to please them and to say, sure, I got your back. I'm there whenever, right? While forgetting that we have limits on that. It doesn't make sense for you to burn your bridges in life. Burn your bridges by way of let's say you've got a job, like I've got a job. I needed to facilitate this podcast earlier so I could still make my job on time. If some of my listeners and viewers messaged me and said, "Hey, that doesn't work for me. I want to be part of your live stream, but I still want it at the same time." And I said, "Okay, I guess I'll have to do that." Then I would be shooting myself in the foot. I'd be shooting myself in the foot as I try to accommodate them because now I'm going to give up the responsibilities of my job, which is a priority even before this podcast because that's how I make my money. And so that isn't going to quite work out well. So that it takes an awareness, first of all, in saying, what are your priorities? What are your commitments? What are your things that you need to attend to before other things can be followed through on? My friends and I, when we were on our holiday, we had such a fantastic time. But as we're enjoying our time, we made the comment saying we could stay here for another couple of weeks, easy, because we're such good company together. And yet, for us to be able to do that would mean we're neglecting some of our other responsibilities. So we had to say no, regardless of how much we wanted to spend time together. Does that make sense? Sometimes it comes to a point of saying responsibilities, doing things that we may not be thrilled about, are even higher in importance, so that we can get what our priorities are that we need to get accomplished. And so, having access to this two-letter word, super important. Getting comfortable with practicing employing that word no is also critical for our self-care. So being aware of what is it that we need, how much sleep do we need, how much rest and relaxation do we need in our life, what are those things at our job fronts that we need to be saying no to because either they're not our responsibility. Let's say some of our coworkers are throwing work on us and we feel compelled to say, okay, yes, I'll do that, even if it's outside your parameters. Learning how to say no is a really helpful thing to caring for yourself so you can give yourself the respect, the courtesy to do the things that are really important along the way. In the absence of saying no, you continue to bring down your worth because you're stretching yourself in ways that you probably weren't designed to do. Is this making sense for some of you? And there are some critical ways in how we can communicate a no. There are some helpful ways in saying no. And here are some suggestions that I've had to consider. When a request is made of you that you know that the right answer is no, but are aware that there's discomfort in saying no, one of the things I've learned how to do is accommodate for the one who's making the request, saying, "Hey, thank you for asking me to do X, Y, and Z. However, I'm unable because X, Y, and Z." There's ways that you can accommodate the request while responding no. "Thank you for asking me to come to your party. I would love to come." You see, you're expressing a desire there. But the no is coming when you're like, "But I've made some other commitments that are really important that I need to attend to." So you see, now you're saying both ends. "I would love to be there, but I'm committed here and I need to make this a priority." That's one way of saying no. That's one way of saying, "I would love to be there, but I can't quite make it." Let's say that they're asking you to do something that you're not really thrilled about, or the answer is no, but it sounds harsh. But you've got no desire. Say, "Listen, I appreciate your request, but the answer is no. I gotta commit elsewhere. I've got some other things that I need to attend to." There is that response as well. Now, as you are thinking about how to word it, it's one, acknowledging what the request is while also saying, "It isn't going to work out for me. This isn't going to work." But that takes you knowing very well where your frame is, what your abilities are, how you're going to move through that dynamic to be able to acknowledge them in the request while still saying no. I would say the acknowledgement is really important because you're able to see them for what they're asking, but then you're also able to communicate to them saying, "This isn't really going to facilitate well in my commitments or in the economy that I've subscribed to," right? I heard I heard a fantastic quote that "no is a fantastic sentence." So sometimes it's just having access to saying no or "no, thank you." That's also really critical. And that is even far more challenging because that just sounds so decisive. It sounds so like full stop, that's it. And that one's a tough one for so many. But the more we're able to practice, the helpful it is in our progression forward in this dynamic that we're walking into. It enables others to start learning that we have boundaries. It enables others to start learning what they can and can't ask us for. For example, as I go to work today, I know I said yes to the job. I'm going to be learning the nature of the job and things that I need to fulfill. One of the things they told me or kind of warned me about is as I'm going to these various restaurants and making deliveries, that there will be requests made by some of the folks, the employees, the owners of these restaurants saying, hey, could you do this while you're here? When you're unloading, could you unload into these shelves? Could you put them here? Could you organize for us all the things you're unloading? I would not know if that was part of my job until my coworkers, my employers were telling me this is a dynamic that is most likely going to happen, and you need to learn how to be able to get out of that setting by saying no. That was helpful for me because I'm learning to do the job. I want to be able to say yes to all the responsibilities that I've signed up for as much as I'm able to, and I think I'm able to handle it. But in so doing it, I also need to know how to say no. So, for example, as I'm pulling up and I go to some of these places and they're trying to, do what they do with new people, they would say something like, hey, could you do this or X, Y, or Z? And I would say, sorry, I can't do that. I've got other deliveries that are time sensitive that I need to get to, for example. Laura Cantis, how are you? Good to see you, my friend. You say, how would you, oh, hold on. How would you recommend leaving a toxic workplace? Oh, that's a great question. Because, Laura Cantis, that is a way of you saying no. No to this opportunity, right? I'm saying right now no to Uber because I need to attend to other commitments, but not because it's a toxic workplace, but because I thoroughly love my role as an Uber driver. But that's a great question. How would you recommend leaving a toxic workplace? Wow, that's a great question. Here's what I would say. First of all, be sure of the dynamics for why you're leaving it and also where you're going to go to. For example, orthontia may be really difficult unless you're convinced about your process to leave your workplace without having something else in the wings that you're working towards. But I can understand. Maybe it's just it's not the good place to be for your mental health, for your growth as a person. Here's how I'd go about doing that. If you know this is not your scene, if it's not a good place for you to be in, a good space for you to be in, what I would propose is going to your employer and thanking them for the opportunity, giving them whatever amount of time that you were committed to give them. If it's a 2 week notice or a 1 month notice, whatever that looks like, say, I want to thank you for the opportunity to work here. I'm going to move on in life now to the next opportunity performing. I wanted to let you know this is my notice I'm giving you for termination of my employment, the 2 weeks or 1 month. And here is that in writing. So you already have a letter written of your intention saying, I am going to give you my 2 month notice as of this date, whatever date today is, and that appreciation piece too, because they have given you that opportunity, right? But you want to move on. I think the thanks piece is really important because even in the midst of a toxic workplace, which is not a good scene to be in, you still want to leave behind a good legacy or a good name, and you want to do that by honoring this individual who's been able to invest in you this way. So that's important, right? And saying, hey, thanks for the opportunity. You've learned some things along the way, right? You've learned some things, especially in reference to why you're leaving. This is not the space you want to be in. You've learned what does it look like for me to be in a good workspace. So you want to acknowledge that. Even as you're saying no, I think the time has come for me to move on. And then making clear and following through on those commitments or obligations and finishing that workplace. Does that make sense? Thank you. Great to talk to you again and love the space where we can share ideas. Pleasure, Orthontis. That's what brings me great pleasure in these settings is to be able to extend myself and saying, how can I encourage and inspire you guys a little further? Do you have trouble saying no? That's the question we're answering today. What does that look like for you guys in your various contexts? If you're like me, I struggled for decades in saying no. What was the shift that helped me move on to be able to start saying no without feeling bad? For me, it was learning first and foremost how to love me, how to appreciate me, how to value my abilities, and how to be able to draw some boundaries. Boundaries are a huge part. For me, no is the response I get when I'm asked to move beyond my boundaries. No is the response I give when people are asking me to overextend myself in a way that doesn't work well or resonate with me. No is one of those things that I show myself that I'm important to me by saying no to others. And as I say no to others and say yes to me, the beautiful part there is they're also learning how to honor and respect me. They're saying, okay, I can't make that request. I need to honor his boundaries, right? And when you're saying no, dear friends, don't forget you're saying yes elsewhere. You're saying no here externally, and you're saying yes to yourself. Yes, to be able to have more space to tend to yourself. Yes, to be able to care for yourself. Yes, to be able to honor yourself. Don't forget that, and that's a really important part. And even as you're saying no, it doesn't necessarily have to be a decisive and hard no where you may have a yes elsewhere. And what do I mean by that? And I learned this from a tantric community that I'm a part of. The big lesson there that I've never forgotten is when you're saying no, it might mean a yes elsewhere if you are a hell's yes there. So, for example, if they're saying, if I get a call from someone and they're saying, "Hey, I would like to go out for coffee with you tomorrow," and I look at my schedule and I see I've got no space tomorrow, my answer is going to be, "No, I'm sorry, I can't make a coffee tomorrow, but yes, I can do it on the next following 2 days. I've got space then." Do you see that? You can say no right now, but if you have desire to still say yes, you can consider where your yes is and how it's going to be reflected, how you're going to be able to communicate that yes. There is access to that. Do you see that, guys? That's a really important thing to note is that your no should be very well honored, but it doesn't always have to be a hard no if you want to see it working in some other setting or context. My response to Uber right now, the Uber question that I'm getting from you guys is yes, I would love to drive for Uber again. No, right now because it's not the right time, but yes, I'm going to be getting back to it because I desire it. I love it, right? So there's that component. At the very heart of it, friends, I guess what I'm trying to say is no is a really important part of our vocabulary that we need to be exercising more and more. No is a really important element of how we look after and care for ourselves. No is a two-letter word that requires courageousness for us to walk into and implement in the way that we are expressing and communicating it to those around us. When we are able to say no, we are committing ourselves in essence to saying, how can I love me more? How can I honor me more? How can I care for me more? And it's really important that we start off in this place because if we're loving others more than we're loving ourselves, if we're being kind to others while being unkind to ourselves, we have the horse behind the cart. We have the cart before the horse, and that's kind of backwards. For us to love and care and be true to those around us in an honest way, we first and foremost need to do that for ourselves with a way that there is nothing held back, with a way that says, this is what is necessary for us. And in so loving ourselves, and so caring for ourselves, and so attending to ourselves by being able to say no and learning how to create a dynamic in which we thrive, we can do maximum good for others. The very fact that I'm spending time with you here on this podcast, I said no to other times when I could do this podcast, so I can get other things done that are important while still doing this podcast. I said no to another time frame, but yes to this time frame, so I can still be available and accessible and sharing and encouraging you along in your way. So even there, it's that example, if you will, of saying, how can I still be true to me? How can I fulfill those things that are important for me while still also being able to have access to this element? You are an important part of my life, dear listeners. I so appreciate the value and purpose that this extension of me to you guys has been. But in the midst of me fulfilling my commitments to you guys, I've had to say no a whole bunch of times. And in those times, it has continued to strengthen our friendship. Imagine how saying no can strengthen you as a person and the connections you have. Have a great Wednesday, friends. I hope to see you tomorrow for episode 107. Bye for now.